Jesus, I want to thank you for giving this time that we can worship you. And I just want to give thank you for giving us another day, Lord. All praise we lift you up to you. All praise you are worthy of. We crown you King of glory, because you are worthy of that crown, Lord. And Lord, there's just no better gift to give you than to worship you and tell you how worthy you are and for all that you do for us in our lives. And Lord, I want to pray over the message. Lord, I ask that you open our hearts so that we can receive your word. Lord, I ask that the Spirit moves through us so that we can understand and make the changes that we need in our hearts, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Well, it looks like... Oh, never mind.
Good morning. You're here today. We will be in the lobby and would love to greet you, to tell you a little bit what we do here at Pathway and things you can get involved, but we welcome you and we're glad you're here. If you are wanting to give today, you can do online, or we have boxes on either exit along with in the entrance center. So we'll be glad to help you with that as well. In a couple weeks, we have baptisms coming up. That's a very exciting event. I'm actually going to throw it out there if anybody's praying on that. This is a great time to honor God, to be baptized, to rejoice with the community and stand up for Jesus. I'm also, if there's any young students that are thinking about doing that, or parents, you want to begin to have that conversation, please see me in the lobby after church. I have a couple booklets that I can give you so you can start praying over that process, because I know we have some kids that are getting ready to make those important decisions as well, and we'd be glad to kind of walk along with you on that decision, okay? This morning, I'm going to remind everybody that we are looking for a couple people to help on a quarterly basis in the kids department. I have a great announcement today, if you haven't been on Facebook, that Pastor Tanner and Alexa have had their baby. Yay! Alexa was very thrilled because normally it goes very fast and it did not this time. So we're welcoming Lael. Hopefully I'm saying that right, Lael. And she was born Friday night at 8:59 p.m. She weighs 8 pounds, 6 ounces, 20 and a half inches. So we are sending our prayers to Tanner and Alexa. If we would join in prayer as they gather it and protect them in this time of healing in the next couple weeks. We will miss them, but we're glad that they're going to have this time as a family. It's a new adventure when you have 4. So let's be praying for them. But check out on Facebook. There's a picture there, and we gather them in love. So remind you, if you want to see me after service, we can talk about, we have some new babies that are coming into the mix, and that's super exciting, but it just means we're short a few people. So I would love to be able to have that conversation with you, okay? So kids, let's go have some fun. If they haven't gone already, join us in the back, and then we'll look forward to service today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. So, how many of y'all have followed that program that's been around for a little while now about how, if you want to stay healthy, you got to do like the 10,000 steps a day? Anybody done nobody here is that healthy. Okay. Anybody that's ever tried that would probably tell you, they get these pedometers and try to track it, or you can get the little Fitbits or Apple Watches, and your phone's kind of tracking it, and you're getting 10,000 steps a day. It's hard. an average normal activity of somebody's day, unless you're some kind of mall cop like Paul Blart, you're not gonna do it on your just average. That's why you see people sitting at their desk going like this, is try to get those steps in. But I'm not talking about steps this morning. But I wanted you to have that 10,000 and how much 10,000 is for a second, because I want to give you a little bit different of a perspective this morning. This statistic might blow your mind. Ladies, men actually use 12,500 words a day on average. I mean, that's an average. So average means some days they may use less, some days they may use more, some guys might use less, some guys might use more. But on average, it is researched that a man uses 12,500 words. So I want you ladies to understand something here. So that means if your husband at work had to use 12,499 words, when you ask them, how's your day? Fine is all they have left. My son, Jeremiah, he's always been a talker. I don't know where he gets it from. Anyway, he talked so much that we would have meals together and he wouldn't finish eating because he wouldn't stop talking long enough to eat. So we actually had to stop him. We'd tell him, it's like, Jeremiah, you've used up all of your words today. Please sit and finish eating your food. Now, this might not surprise you. Ladies use a few more words on average than men. A few. So men use 12,500. Ladies, it's estimated you use between 25,000 and 50,000 words in a day. Just a couple. But there's a reason for that, because we're wired a little differently, and men are wired to communicate to report, while women are wired to communicate for rapport, for connection. So that's men are just, give me the facts. So a guy's going to call up his wife and say, yeah, dinner, 5 o'clock, B-dubs, bye. And ladies, if your husband did that to you, you would look at the phone and say, what's wrong with him? He's being so snippy. And the guy's like, I just communicated her everything she needed to know. Or, I know this is probably unlikely to happen, but if the guy looks at his wife and says, honey, let's have salad for dinner. I know it wouldn't happen. But guys, your wife is probably hearing, you think I'm fat. There's so many things when it comes to communication where we can miss each other. And we're continuing in this series called Define the Relationship. How can we have God-honoring romantic relationships, husbands and wives? And communication is a big deal when it comes to that. The Bible talks so much about communication. A perfect example is, as Miss Kim has explained to you, Tanner and Alexa had their baby. If I would have made that announcement, it would have been done. What did she do? It was born at this time, it weighed this much, it was... And guys, stick with me here. We don't know what any of that means. but we figure just saying it happened, we're done. It was communicated. You got what you needed to know. They had a baby. In this day and age of technology that is supposed to make us more connected, make communication so much more effective and easy, I think if we were honest with each other, we'd have to admit that communication is in the toilet in our country, in our world. And technology is partly to blame for it. I'm not going to harp completely on technology all morning, but I hope that you understand that just because you have a phone and you text your spouse, that's not necessarily having healthy, good communication. So what does it really look like? Now, I need to let you know, as you stand here and look at me, you can take what I say for truth because I am an expert at communication and I always do it right. I taught a communications lab at a college, so obviously I know what I'm talking about. In fact, my wife and I met when I taught a communications lab in college, and she thought I was really annoying. But one thing you learn when you take any kind of a communications class or course or look at the dynamics of communication simply can be broke down into kind of 4 elements. You have a sender of information, you have a receiver of information. The sender encodes the information, and the receiver decodes the information. The problem isn't those 4 elements. The problem is that the sender and receiver can be very different, and so encoding and decoding can come across in so many different ways, and they can just miss each other. And so communication is more than just saying stuff. And that's why the Bible teaches and actually has some pretty strong words about communication. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 7, it says, "A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul." That's a pretty strong endorsement on our mouths getting us in trouble. Some of us that like to talk a lot don't have to be told that. We know that it's easy. But here's why communication, I think, especially in marriage, is so important. The better, healthier we communicate, it builds trust with that other person. But here's the key. The more trust you have with a person, the better you can communicate. And the more you communicate, the more you're going to have trust for one another. Do you see how this goes? It just keeps going on and on. Trust and communication, trust and communication. Those build on each other and help a relationship grow stronger, more intimate, and closer to one another. So I want us to look at Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. All of Proverbs has a lot of teaching about the mouth and words and communication and speech, but we're just going to focus on part of one chapter that hits a lot of the major topics, and that's Proverbs chapter 18. I could pull verses from all kinds of different places, but this hits on some of the probably biggest topics when it comes to our marriage. So Proverbs 18, I'm going to start in verse 12, if you want to follow along with me. It says, "Before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. If one gives answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. A man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? An intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great. The one who states his case seems right until others come and examine him. The lot puts an end to quarrels and decides between powerful contenders. A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yields of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. He who finds a good wife finds a good thing. Come on, guys. Amen. Thank you. Brandon, you're the only one going home with brownie points tonight. I'm just saying. He who finds a good wife has a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. The poor use entreaties, but the rich answer roughly. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So there's a lot in there, and I'm not going to be able to cover all of it, but I think there are three truths about communication that we can get from this proverb, these verses in this proverb. The first one is, if you want to communicate and build trust, first, we need to listen to understand. Listen so that we can understand. Verse 13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is to his folly and shame. You know, this proverb and a lot of the proverbs, the book of Proverbs is called the book of wisdom. And in contrast to that, if you're not wise, you're a fool, right? So these are truths for us not to have foolish communication, or to, if you want to think about it, to foolproof your communication. So if you want to communicate and build trust in your relationship, first, listen to understand. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's been out. It's a leadership, iconic, classic book. But one of its principles is seek first to understand and then to be understood. That sounds really simple. But do you realize that most people do exactly the opposite? We enter into communication thinking it is our job to get the other person to understand us. You know, my job in communicating is you need to understand me. And when we go into any kind of a conversation that way, the problem is our ears are turned off to what the other person is actually saying. Because we don't want to understand what they have to say. Our goal is to get them to understand us. And it's backwards. We need to be able to open up our eyes, our heart, and our ears. Over 90% of communication, it's been proven, is nonverbal. Never spoken. It's how we hold our body, whether we have our arms crossed. It's the expression on our face, confused, stern. It's the tone of our voice. Hi, Matt, it's good to see you. He knows I love him. No, oh, wait. I mean, it's all of those things that you know, I could say whatever, but if my body says something else, if my voice says something else, it's different. Ralph Waldo Emerson had a famous quote that I love. Your actions are speaking so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying. And we need to understand we can go through life that in that posture. But if we really listen with our eyes and our ears and our heart, the only way we can do that is if we first know the person we're talking to. The better you know somebody, the better you can communicate. So this may surprise you. I am an external communicator, or I'm an external thinker or processor. Anybody with me? Any external processors? Anybody? Come on, I am not the only person. Who here thinks out loud? Okay, 2, 3 other people. All right, the rest of y'all are liars. But there are basically 2 kinds of people. Maybe there's 3 now. There's people that process externally, people that process internally, and people that just don't know. I'll give you that. But I'm an external processor, so I think out loud. And it helps me to think out loud. For some reason, and I can't explain it to you, the science to you of it, but I can think better when I'm talking it out. Internal processors don't understand that. So if I'm talking to somebody as an external processor, sometimes I have to warn them. I'm just, thinking out loud here, okay? I'm not decided on this. This is not something that's confirmed. Guess what God blessed me with? To marry an internal processor. So what does that mean? Well, that means that she's not going to likely speak until she's had time to kind of think about it, chew on it, get decided on it. And so when she says something, it's a much more well thought through process. when you're in a relationship with somebody, if you don't understand that about one another and you don't talk about that and understand that, oh, okay, well, she needs to give me room sometimes to process things externally and not necessarily react to something thinking that I'm decided on it. But I also need to give her time after I introduce something so that she might even be able to go away and think about it before we make a decision. That's what healthy communication does, is they're not decided, they're not giving an answer before they really hear the other person, as the proverb tells us. So how do you break through this this default of not really actively listening? Well, verse 12 tells us, before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. I think unless we can humbly understand that someone else might have information that might be better than what we have. This is one of my dadisms that my kids probably ignore and hear me say way too much, is somebody that knows everything learns nothing. And we've all met somebody that knows everything, haven't we? None of you in here. You guys keep your elbows in. But somebody who knows everything learns nothing, because if you know everything, there's nothing for you to learn. If you have a posture of, I know everything I need to know, or I know better, or I know best, then nobody else has anything to offer you. But if you took a posture of, I don't know everything, there might be some more information that I need. Somebody might have a better perspective or understanding of this than I do. Then you're going to be able to more openly hear them and try to understand what they're saying. Active listening, you maybe have heard that before. This is just some quick kind of tips on active listening. One thing you can do to actively listen is actually listen and repeat back to them what you're hearing. Don't sound like a mockingbird, but try to understand what they're saying and say it in your own words back to them. When you repeat back to somebody what you thought they had said, communication becomes more complete. Because they can affirm, yes, you understood me. Okay? And do we ever, as couples, not say things as directly as we should? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's like the passive conversation of, don't you think we should plan a vacation? That's not a question. That's a statement. We're planning a vacation. Get on board. Okay? We need time off. Maybe it's even deeper than that of, I'm feeling stressed out, burnt, or disconnected from you. We need time one-on-one to communicate. There's so many different layers that are beyond just the question, I think we need to plan a vacation. If you responded to that quickly, thinking in the hecticness of everything, it's like, well, we don't have time for that. Now you've just shut down that person that you're in the closest relationship to and said, this isn't even up for discussion. That's a whole different kind of listening, because listening communicates value. We listen to something that we feel is valuable. We listen to information that we feel has value. And a couple weeks ago, I talked about this idea that men and women are different. Women, just God has programmed them to need to feel and know that their husbands love them. And men, we need our wives to know that we need them to look at us with respect. And when you listen to one another, you're offering that person love, and you're offering that person respect. So that's the first thing, is first listen to understand. But if you want to communicate and build trust, the proverb goes into another topic that hopefully all of us need to hear. You need to predetermine to fight fair. Y'all, if you're living with somebody else and God's blessed you with that, I don't care how you fight, in one way or another you fight. Now, I've heard couples say, oh, we've never fought. We've been married for decades and decades and decades, and we've never fought. And you ask them, and you dig a little deeper, well, have you ever disagreed? Oh, yeah, we disagree all the time. Well, what happens when you disagree? Oh, well, we just go in our little separate corners and don't talk to each other for a while. Guess what that is? That's a fight! Just because you don't scream and yell at each other, it doesn't mean that it's not a fight. Do you know the most dangerous weapon that couples have against one another? The silent treatment. Guys, please, you guys got to help me here. Don't make me feel alone. Men, how many of us have said something stupid and had the quiet car ride home? Anybody else? Yeah, thank you, brothers. Thank you. That is the loudest car ride I ever had. I mean, the silence is deafening. I mean, you know you did something. You may not even know what it is yet, but you know it's there. Proverbs 18 verse 19 says, a brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. The only picture I had when I read that verse is it's like you're in a cage match and only one of you is coming out alive. Right? You know, until one person is down for the count, nobody's getting out of that cage. And that's what quarreling is like. When I do premarital counseling, I meet with couples, you know, of course, that are looking to get married, and they're all Twitter-pated in love. You've seen them. They're sickening, aren't they? I mean, you were never like that. But you know, they're never going to argue. They're always going to resolve all of their problems equitably, and they're going to get along, and they just love each other so much that they're never going to have any issues. And so one of the things when you do premarital counseling, you try to give them tools. And I always tell them, I know you don't need this right now. You have a brand new house where everything is working, everything is functional because it is brand new. But guess what happens over time? The house gets old and it starts to break down. And the thing I'm going to tell you is I'm going to give you some tools to put in a toolbox so that when it starts breaking down, you can go, oh, hey, wait a second. Remember Pastor Tony told me or told us that we might need these tools sometime. And so there's this nature of, if you wait until you're in conflict, it's almost impossible to find the right tools. But if you develop a toolkit and have a toolkit that you've both talked about and agreed upon, predetermined to use, then when you're in conflict, it gives you a place to say, whoa, 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 I can see this going out of hand. We need to stop. You know, and whatever that is, I'll tell them sometimes, maybe you predetermined is like, I can't deal with it and I need to process it more, so you need to be able to let me walk away. And if you've predetermined that that's what you're going to do, it's a lot different than in the heat of the conflict saying, I'm not talking to you and walking away, right? It may be still not easy, but it's different because you've predetermined it. So you need to predetermine to fight fair, because that's what healthy couples do with their communication. Now, James tells us in one sentence, he kind of sums up what if we could all do, all of our marriage communications would be better. James 1:19 says we should be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But I've seen couples that turn into the Incredible Hulk. You won't like me when I'm angry. I mean, just turn green and muscly and just want to smash things. Because anger, when anger takes over in communication, communication ceases immediately. When you let anger have control, then you no longer have it. And so if you let anger enter into your communication because you feel like you need to vent or get it out, all these kind of things that are going to be coming out of your mouth, that are going to be coming out of your actions, are things you can never put back in. So we need to be slow to become angry. Proverbs 15:1 says this: a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. How many people have felt that happen in their communications before? Where somebody that talks to you sternly or talks to you rudely or talks to you angrily, what is your initial reaction? Get them back, right? I've got to match their volume. I need to match their intensity. I need to match that because I need to show them that I care about what I think as much as they care about what they think. And then it just becomes boom, boom, boom. And you're not going to reach a resolution. You're just going to be metaphorically, hopefully only, throwing punches. Because the anger has taken over. So to fight fair, I want to give you some practical tips. To fight fair, predetermine, here's just some practical things that you can do. Number one, don't call each other names. And you might sit there and say, oh, I would never do that. Well, we do it sometimes without even thinking about it. If somebody says something we don't like, we sit there and say, well, that's stupid. You know what you just did? You called them stupid. Or you're just crazy. It doesn't always have to be harsh, foul language kind of names. You can use adjectives, if you will, to describe what you feel about what they're saying, but they are adjectives that person will wear, and it becomes name calling. If you go to that level in your communication, I guarantee you're not on a road that's going to end well. Don't call each other names. Another one, and this is one I struggle with. Don't raise your voice. I actually have to be very, very careful with that because I am an excited talker and I talk loud when I get excited. I don't mean to yell. I'm not intending to yell, but my wife has many times looked at me and said, will you stop yelling? And I'm like, I'm not yelling. You want to see yelling? I'm just excited. But you get it. Don't you guys feel sorry for her? Yeah. I'm going to have a conversation with Joni Rockwell. So do the best you can not to raise your voice. And I have to be super intentional, especially when we're in tension in our relationship, to try to do that soft answer and not a firm, loud answer. Another thing is, don't get historical. I'm not mispronouncing that word. It's not hysterical. I'm talking historical. Don't get historical. Don't go start dredging up things from the past about the things that they've done or haven't done or haven't said, and you start digging up old bones, and you start bringing old bones into the conversation. When you start doing that, you basically you're off the rails again. The issue that is at hand no longer matters because you've drudged up old dead bones that should have been left buried. Don't get historical. Don't use absolutes. It's very, very common in language, and we see it not just in marriage relationships, but all over. This person, that person always says this, never does that. And those statements, though they may feel right, are generally never actually true. And so as soon as that person hears, you never do this, the first thing they're going to sit there and say, oh, yes, I do. Let me tell you when I did. And now everything that you've said doesn't matter. And they're going to want to attack back with, but you never do this, or you always say that. One way that I've been shown to help with that a lot of times is it's good to kind of switch it to I feel language. If you can look at your spouse and say, when you say that, I feel this way. I feel like I'm not being heard. I feel like you're dismissing what I have to say. I feel this way, because they can't argue with your feelings, but you don't want to talk about your feelings. You want to talk about what they're doing wrong. So don't miss that opportunity to just turn that around. All right, this is every sermon I end up usually having a soapbox. So let me get my soapbox here and step up on it. If you want to make this pastor mad at you, let me catch you arguing with your spouse on Facebook or some type of social media. I will get in your face so fast. But here's the funny thing is you'd be amazed at how often I see it happen. That spouses bring stuff up, and they may think that they're being vague or something like that, but if your spouse knows when you make that little comment about, oh, I'm having such a bad day, I wish everybody just leave me alone. You know what? If your spouse knows that they're the person who caused you to have a bad day, you just complained about your spouse on Facebook, and it doesn't matter that you didn't mention them by name. Don't do it via text. If the person really means that much to you, it's worth saying to them in person. You know why we do this stuff in social media and text? Because it protects us. We can say whatever we want without any consequences. It's not true, but we have the illusion that it's true. Or the other reason we do it on social media is that we're going to sit there and say something, and somebody's going to jump in and say, oh yeah, girl, I know what you mean. Or, dude, I can't believe that happened to you. And what you get is you get this affirming from somebody that really doesn't even know the entire situation, but you now feel more affirmed in your opinion, so you can go back to that person and tell them why they're wrong. Again, not moving towards healthy communication. Another thing you need to predetermine to do, no matter what, is never threaten divorce. I've seen it with couples that have been in counseling with me before, that D word comes out way, way, way too easily as a threat or even as a concession of, I guess this, the only thing we can do is. But as soon as you mention that D word, you've basically broken a deep, cherished trust because you stood before God and said, till death do you part. And you just told that person, maybe not so much. If you want to fight fair, predetermine that word is never going to enter your vocabulary. I can say in my 26 plus years of being married, my wife and I had determined that, and it's never came into our vocabulary. We have had times we have not been on the same page. We have had times that we disagree. We still have times that we disagree and we're not on the same page. But we both know that that's not a word that enters our vocabulary. It's not there. So the last one, this might be the most important one. Get your pens out. I want to make sure you hear this. No, seriously. Never, ever, ever, ever quote your pastor during a fight. It's kind of similar to some of the other ones, but I thought it needed to be said. And that could actually be true for a lot of things. Maybe you're reading a book, you saw an article or something like that, and you start quoting somebody else, or somebody told me this, and that's what's wrong with you. And you're starting to because basically what you're doing is now you're trying to bring somebody else into the conversation or the relationship to basically say, this is the way you bring your pastor into that conversation. Is what? It seems like we're having struggles here. Maybe it would be healthy for us to sit down and talk to one of the pastors. If you want to do that, Pastor Tanner and I are all for it. But do not quote us as a weapon against one another. We forbid that. You cannot use our words in that way. You can't use the Bible in that way. I've seen that happen before too. It's not about winning. Do you understand that? Because guess what? If you're in a marriage and one of you wins the argument, what does that mean about the other one? They lost. And here's the problem. God didn't make you two. He made you one. So if your spouse loses, guess what? you lose. Our job as husband, our job, no, not our job as wife, your job as wives, our job is to help the other person always win. And that's what goes into this last one I want to bring up. If you want to communicate and build trust, speak life into one another. Speak life into one another. Verse 21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Verse 14, a man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit, who could bear that? You know how many spouses I've seen that have had crushed spirits? If your spouse has a crushed spirit, you know whose responsibility it is to bring that back up, to mend that? It's yours, not theirs. If you're married, you made a commitment that it is your responsibility. You know, Yvonne and I, as I kind of already mentioned, we're different people. I'm an external processor. She's an internal processor. I don't think God could have put two more different people together. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. I use lots of words. She uses few words. I love acts of service. She loves other things. It's not a bad thing. But Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's been out. He's got a whole series of them. But the original one was within marriage. He proposed that there are these 5 different kinds of love languages. And I think they're languages of appreciation or of recognition. They basically are ways that you can show somebody care, affection, and love. And what he says is that we all have a primary one. And the problem is that our primary one may be different than our spouse's primary one. But what we're going to do is we think that because we appreciate this more, that that's what they would want. So just as quickly to kind of go through them, here are the 5 love languages Gary Chapman says. This one is physical touch, and guys, don't go there. It's more than just sex. Could be a hug, could be holding hands. Any kind of physical touch is a way to show affection. One is gifts. One is quality time. Just spending time with that person makes them feel loved. Words of affirmation. You know, writing them a little note, telling them they look beautiful. And then acts of service. Basically what he's saying is that if you want to get to that person's heart the quickest, figure out what their love language is, what their primary love language is, and speak to them in that love language. Not your preferred love language, in their preferred love language. That's how you can speak life to them. You can show them love and affection and affirmation. You can share with each other your dreams and your desires. And when you do that, and you can consistently do that, then what you're doing is and this is your practical tip on this whole speaking life to one another, then you're making deposits in their emotional bank account. Everybody here know what a bank account is? If you don't have money in the bank account and you need to make a withdrawal, what happens? Good things or bad things? Bad things. You're overdrawn, right? We all have emotional bank accounts with our spouse, meaning that if I make deposits in it by doing things to build her up, then when we inevitably have times maybe of conflict or disagreement or stress or whatever it is, there's going to be times that I'm going to have to make withdrawals from that. And the more faithful I am to making deposits, then the more likely it is that I'm not going to go bankrupt making withdrawals. But if we're constantly making withdrawals and not making any deposits into our spouse, it's going to hurt our relationship. This shouldn't need to be said, but we need to prioritize our spouse's needs, each other's needs. The Bible talks about that over and over again. My wife, I'm an early riser and I'm a light sleeper, okay? This is just one of those other differences. My wife loves sleeping and she likes having quiet mornings. And I don't know why God has such a sense of humor, but he does. But here's the thing is I get up, and when I get up, I get going, and I'll often be up early, much earlier than she'll want to be up or need to be up for anything. And for me, I sit there and I think it's the most loving, respectful thing for me to get ready as quietly as possible and not disturb her in her sleep. And so I was doing that. I was trying not to wake her up and just kind of slip out quietly when I got up and moving in the morning. Well, one day she told me, she goes, "Why don't you say goodbye to me and tell me you love me when you leave?" I'm like, "'Cause you're asleep. And I don't want to wake you." And she's like, "Well, I just think it would be nice if you did that." Ever since then, now before I leave, I lean down and I say, "I love you, goodbye." Yeah, and then I leave. "I'm sorry, honey, I had to. It was funny." She's not that bad. She usually gives me a smile or something. But that's a way that I know I'm making, every single day I'm making just a little deposit. And I heard her, I listened to her, I determined that she had a need, and then I did what I can, a real simple thing. But it wasn't the way I would want it. I mean, I would sit there and say, "Hey, you know what? If you can slip out quietly and not wake me up, God bless you." I'd feel so loved by that. Because if I wake up and I can't get back to sleep. She can just roll right over and go back to sleep. I can't do that. So it's just, we're different, but I knew that she needed that, and that's what I did. So what? Real quick, I want to wrap some stuff up here. Healthy communication, I hope you understand by now, it doesn't just happen. We talk, we use words all day long. We use lots of words. We use lots of nonverbal communication all day long. But healthy communication doesn't just happen. An average couple, it was researched, an average couple that goes out to eat just to one meal, they will connect with each other in some way over 100 times over that one meal. A look, a smile, a word, a touch, a joke. Some way they're going to make, if you just take the time to do it, a deliberate, intentional time. But here's what they also found, is as soon as you added technology to that, the amount of times you connect with one another dives. And I know sometimes in this day and age, the idea of putting your phones away and realizing that you can be out of touch with somebody for an hour seems unthinkable. But for the sake of your marriage, put the phone down. I don't know how many couples over a meal are sitting there saying, yeah, what are you doing today? Yeah, I don't know. They never get any deeper because they're scrolling through the last thing that they said. Or, you've seen this, and I've seen it too. I've even had it in my family before. You're sitting in different rooms texting each other. Or at the same table, texting each other. Because for some reason, that's the way we think and process, is that we need open up our mouths, open up our hearts, open up our ears, talk to one another. Not all communication is good communication. And if not all good communication is good communication, that means it's not healthy. But here's the thing is, you know what has been proven by research? Healthy communication increases a person's physical and mental health. Go figure. If you are communicating in a healthy fashion, you will be physically and mentally healthier. And I would even go so far as saying spiritually healthier. Because what you're doing is you're building a relationship of trust. When you have a relationship of trust, then your communication can be more intimate and deeper. And then that will bring you in your relationship, even in the midst of turmoil and stress and crisis, it'll bring you peace, it'll bring you unity, it'll bring you understanding. I have not liked that God has allowed my wife and I to be separated for 6 months because she's still in Ohio and I'm here. That is not our preferred method. But I'm also very, very thankful that He has given us the ability to have a healthy enough communication that we can endure it and trust that God's still in it and in the midst of it. And it's not tearing us apart. I think in some ways it's probably, as much as we don't like it, growing us together. Because we make a lot more deliberate, intentional times to talk to one another. Because we're not just always around and just assume it's going to happen. So it's never foolish to spend time and energy on God-honoring communication. By listening, by fighting fair, by speaking life into one another. Now, I want to admit something here before we get too far, just as I wrap this up. I'm not going to assume that in this room that there's not somebody that has communication within their marriage that's just broken. That's not working, that hasn't been working for a while, and it's gotten to the point that it's hard to even think about putting these good, healthy, God-honoring principles in place because it just feels like everything's so broken. But I want to tell you something. The best way of fixing that is by humbly stopping, acknowledging, asking, offering forgiveness. It's the greatest reset button that God has given us. That even while we were yet sinners, he forgave us, and we're supposed to forgive as we have been forgiven. It isn't about them being wrong or right, or us being wrong or right. It's just asking for forgiveness. If you want to make love to your spouse, and I'm not talking about the sex thing, that's next week. Now I got you all enticed. If you want to make love to your spouse, these are the sexiest words you can sometimes tell them. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do. You may even want to add I was wrong. Goes over well. It's a good place to start. Because a broken trust can be rebuilt. It may take time and energy, but it can be. And you may think, it's too far gone, or I just don't think it can come back from this. But you know what? With Christ, all things are possible. So I don't believe that there's anything that's too far gone. Now, I feel in some ways that there's more I could say on this topic, but I've used up my 12,500 words. So I just want to end with this. There's a prayer in Psalm 141 that I guess want to challenge you to maybe pray with your spouse, or maybe you need to right now just pray it by yourself. But a prayer that I think could be a really good reminder every single day. Psalm 141, it says, "Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth, and keep watch over the doors of my lips." I know a lot of marriages that could be greatly healed if they just prayed that prayer and lived that prayer every single day. Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth, and keep watch over the doors of my lips. Amen. Father God, thank you that, in many ways, I believe we can look to you as the great communicator. To look at your word and how well you communicated your love to us, how thoroughly you've come to us and presented yourself and opened yourself up so that we could know and understand you and you as you know and understand us. And we may not ever be able to do that perfectly, but you give us enough that we can fall in love with you, and help us as we live out that love, as we live out all of these principles, Lord, that you will give us a ability, a sense of how within our own relationships and our own marriages that we can communicate in a way that honors you with our words, our actions, the way we fight for the truth, the way we fight not just with one another, but we fight for our marriages in a world that wants to tear them apart. Lord, I pray for each and every couple in this room. And for those that one day may be in a relationship that requires this God-honoring communication, that you will set a guard on our lips and help us speak life into one another for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Have a great rest of your Sunday. And I'm serious, next week we're talking about physical intimacy. Invite your friends.